Depression is an interesting thing. Just a quick show of hands, if you don't mind. How many people don't really deal with depression or haven't ever dealt with depression? Two. So generally, and I don't want either of you to feel like you're missing anything. Well, that's 2 out of 125. How many people that do experience depression feel like they're the only one? You don't have to raise your hands. But how many of us, when we experience depression, feel like we're letting ourselves down, or we're letting down our family, or we're doing something we should be embarrassed about? But yet, the vast majority of people have this experience. Interestingly enough, when you're falling into that world, you're actually conjoining with a lot of beings. A lot of beings. And if you moved outside of our own planet, which we're supposed to be pretty happy, into situations where people really have severe difficulty in their life situations, perhaps those tender moments of the heart actually connect us to being human on some level. The problem is that we isolate ourselves. We cut ourselves off from that kind of sustenance. That emotional sort of sustenance is saying this is a glorious moment. It's an extraordinarily painful one, but everyone does it. It's part of the rhythm of the human mind. It's part of the rhythm of living in a society like ours, and it's certainly part of the rhythm of winter. To shut down a little bit, to need more quiet, to get easily overwhelmed. What we don't need to do is to feel terrible about it, beat ourselves up about it, and make the situation worse. And that's what I want to talk about. There is no cure, really, ultimately, from a meditation point of view for depression. But there is a cure for the anxiety and difficulties and dysfunctionality that we create around it. Does that make sense?
Say that again?
Yeah. There's no cure for the depression itself, necessarily. But there is a cure for all of the environment that we create around it. The tension, the anxiety, the embarrassment. The way to work with it, and I'll go more into detail, is to go into it and not be afraid of it. Now, that does not mean encourage it. It doesn't mean, you know, listening to loud goth music and painting your face and getting very dark. That was my generation. I did that. It was stupid. There was a lot of good music and some good moments, but it was ridiculous, you know. It was clothes I looked absolutely ridiculous into. I think thin people have to be goth people. Chubby goth people are really embarrassing. Yeah, I mean, just me and makeup. It just didn't work well, especially kind of fairly blue-collar environment I grew up in. It just wasn't, it was kind of silly, really. But inside, I thought, you know, I was tortured and, you know, and dark, and I wanted to make it something dramatic and artistic and creative. So the idea is particularly that, and you could translate this to your own generation or whatever you think it is. I mean, you know, if you didn't wear, you know, long black coats and black mascara, you know, whatever you did in your world to cover up your pain, including, you know, wearing a suit and tie, or whatever it was that was an expression of covering up your pain, whether you tried to become it or hide from it, in some way we're not being naked with it. We're not just allowing it to be as it is. We're either dressing it up and acting it out, or we're repressing it. And this is the central point, that bipolarization I was talking about, too tight, too loose. Either we're expressing our pain in some poetic, dramatic fashion, or we're repressing it, we're holding it down and we're hiding it. And I think most of us when the panic comes, when the oh my gosh comes of watching the rug get pulled out from under us and our emotions threaten to take us over, most of us only see those two options. Either I have to blame it on somebody and get really mad, or I have to just bite it, push it down. There is an alternative. And the alternative is everything in the middle, between those extremes. The alternative is to see that our life promotes depression instead of gets rid of it by constantly promoting extremes. We might think we're good people, that we stop at red lights and we wait for the little man before we cross. Or whatever we do as a society, we're incredibly controlled. I know the odd person that screams on the street freaks us out a little bit, and we think, whoa, New York. But there's 9 million people here living in relative harmony. You know, we all go down to the subway, we all check, we all punch the clock, we all put our clothes on, we all go to work. We're all good people. We're all so good. And inside, some of us are frightened, damaged, longing and hurt, and what I'm suggesting is that's what makes us human. That's what makes us interesting. How many writers do we have here? How many times do you write characters that have no problems? How many people like to go to movies? Name some movies, just throw some out.
Rosemary's Baby.
There you go. Certainly no tension or drama in that movie. You see my point? I mean, how often do you go see a movie that's like everybody's happy? Does anybody remember Annie Hall? Yeah, there's that beautiful scene where, you know, Woody Allen is talking to the camera about how some people could seem so happy, and behind him is this couple that are really attractive and they're really good looking. And he goes, let's find out their secret. So he interviews them and they said, what is your secret? And they said, we're incredibly shallow people. That's a gross, if you remember it, that was, you know, my generalization of the scene. But it's a great scene, and it's a good point. I mean, our damage is what makes us interesting. You know? If you go to the woods and you see a tree that's been hit by lightning, you don't think, oh, what a jerk. You know? But if we do that to ourselves, you know? Trees don't sit there and go, oh, I have a wonky branch. Kids won't play on me. Nobody loves me. We do that. We beat ourselves up. We hold ourselves up to not only extreme expectations, but expectations of what? Investigate it. Look at it. And that's the theory of meditation. It's the idea of actually beginning to look at these things and not taking them just at face value. Not just expecting that this is the way it is, but actually looking into it. What are we trying to beat ourselves into? What is it that we want to be? Not human? Do we want to not feel? Do we want to be kind of robots of some sort? Maybe some people think that's what meditation will do. Like the Buddha, he just sits there. That's because he's a statue. Or a painting. In real life, he moved around. In fact, he farted. I bet. Belched occasionally. Maybe even at the wrong time. You know? Maybe embarrassed himself. One person once asked famously, one of our teachers, Trungpa Rinpoche, my teacher's father, and they said, did the Buddha feel pain? Or was he above that? And Trungpa Rinpoche said, he felt more pain than we do. And so that's the twist here. And what I want to recommend to you is the journey to wakefulness is not a journey away from pain. It's a journey toward it. It's a journey toward acceptance of our mortality, acceptance of our limitations, and acceptance of our hurt and struggle. If you can accept that, you become truly strong.